Hello, everyone, and welcome to this session organized by Jnana Prabodhini Foundation's Analytics Group. In today's session, we will focus on an overview and introduction to think tanks. Let us begin with a basic question. What even is a think tank? What do think tanks do? What impact and influence do they have in the real world? To answer this question, let us begin with a simple story. This story takes us back to the 2008 financial crisis. This crisis greatly affected the world, beginning due to the United States housing market crash and a general financial crisis. It spread across many countries, affecting growth rates for years to come. During the context of the 2008 financial crisis, a lot of the global decision making was taken by nations from the global north, powerful and influential nations. However, it was realized, it came to light during the context of the global financial crisis that these nations may not be well suited, the best suited to tackle such global economic crises. As a response, today we have something called the G20. It is a broader global forum that is more representative of different countries and geographies. Some of you may be aware that the G20 is inclusive of the global south. Today, this year, the India is hosting the G20, and the G20 is wider in its impact in the sense it includes more of the world's population, of the globe's economic growth, international trade, as well as global investment. As I mentioned, G20 emerged in the response to the global financial crisis, where there was an awareness, an acute awareness that the G8 system itself is not enough. And even though the G20 has roots in the late 1990s, it was really after the 2008 crisis that it emerged as the premium forum for international economic cooperation in troubled economic times. How did G20 even come about to be, though? Well, the G20, or rather the modern avatar of the G20, was proposed by the CIGI, the Center for International Governance Innovation. This is a think tank, a policy institution. They are engaged in multiple aspects of research and policy making. And as you can see in front of you, one of their major areas of research is the G20 and G7, though they also focus on a other range of broader issues such as security, banking, financial systems, trade, and more. Thus, you can see how a think tank helped reshape the global economic engagement forums or global economic engagement platforms. And a think tank does many such things like this and many other things as well. CIGI in particular focused on areas of trade, law, security, economic primacy, and more. They interact with governments within countries and across countries, as well as other non-governmental institutions. And they publish their findings through peer-reviewed research as well as other platforms to make sure that their findings and their research is heard across different contexts. This brings back to the question where we started, that is, what is a think tank? I think this example has hopefully given you an intuition of what kinds of things a think tank can do. But just to make things more formal, we'll introduce a working definition, or rather some defining features of think tanks. Think tanks focus on social, environmental, climate change issues. They focus on public health, political strategy, economics, industry, military, technology, culture, education, and more. They focus on many broad areas that are relevant to public interest. Their primary activities are engaging in research, analysis, and policy making, and they communicate these findings through events. They publish articles and studies, and some think tanks even draft policies and laws. And the output that they produce, that is the facts and the opinions that these think tanks produce, are often then consumed by governments, by businesses, media organizations, social movements, and other interest groups. These are some of the broad defining features of think tanks. These are some of the prominent think tanks that you might have heard out there. There are many, many more, but you might have heard of, say, Brookings, Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, the Pew Research Center. These are all examples of American think tanks. In the context of India, you have India's premier think tank, which is the Observer Research Foundation. You also have the government of India's apex think tank, which is the Niti Aayog. And you have other think tanks in India, such as Sandeep Vaslekar's Strategic Foresight Group. However, this is just the tip of the iceberg. There are, as of 2020, over 11,000 think tanks in the world, and the number is only growing. However, as you can see, the geographical spread or distribution of think tanks is not even. The United States dominates the global think tank space. In fact, the United States and its allies represent a large chunk of the top 10 countries containing the most number of think tanks. And this has partly to do with history and due to other reasons. So modern think tanks really did emerge before the Second World War in the context of the United Kingdom and other English-speaking countries. And in those initial days, they were really focused on the issues that were associated with industrialization and urbanization. Those were some of the rapid changes that occurred in the world in the 19th and early 20th centuries. However, during the Cold War, and after the Second World War, think tanks got a different flavor. Many Soviet, American, and Western, or should we say NATO-aligned think tanks emerged, and these think tanks guided government Cold War policy. However, the picture has been changing after the Cold War. More and more think tanks have been established in non-Western parts of the world, and more than half of all of think tanks today were established after 1980. In the context of India, India has more than 600 think tanks, and most of these think tanks, the spurt of growth in think tanks has really happened after 2017, where we see the number of think tanks more than doubling in a very rapid time span. And what do these think tanks look like? What does this rapidly growing think tank sector look like? Well, think tanks are relatively smallish organizations in the sense they employ anywhere between 30 to more than a few thousand employees. The backgrounds of people who work in think tanks range from politics, economy, governance, and increasingly from technology. Importantly, though, traditional think tanks really emphasize the expertise, experience, and networks of their members. So in the context of the United States, many think tanks are based in Washington, D.C. In the context of India, many think tanks are based in Delhi, or specifically Lutyens, Delhi, and they tap into retired civil servants, military officers, and judges, people who have influence and can have an impact. As for their budgets, think tank budgets range from anywhere between $1 million to $500 million per year. So that's between 8 crore to over 400 crore Indian rupees. And their sources of funding are often not transparent, but in the cases when we do know the funding sources of think tanks, they range from governments, militaries, political parties, businesses, and wealthy individuals. So this is a brief overview of the organizational structure of think tanks. And you might ask yourself, is it really worth it? Is it really worth for so much money to be spent by experts and elites across the world to take decisions on the behalf of others? Well, one reason why think tanks are needed, or why so much money needs to be devoted to those, is that think tanks address wicked problems. Wicked problems, as commonly defined in the context of policy and social planning, are problems that are really difficult to solve. Oftentimes the problems are not even well defined. There is no immediate or ultimate test to their solution. The solutions are often not right or wrong or better or worse. There are many different stakeholders, and you often don't know whether the solution has even been achieved. Wicked problems are different from tame problems. And examples of tame problems are chess, golf, many proofs in mathematics where the solution and the problem is well defined and stable. When we know when the solution has been reached or wrong, the solutions are clearly right or wrong. The solutions belong to a similar classes of solutions that can be solved in particular ways. And you can clearly abandon solutions that have not worked out in your favor. Wicked problems have none of these characteristics. That's why they are so difficult. And these are just some examples of important global wicked problems. And the reason why they're so difficult to solve is because they're wicked. It's difficult to solve poverty. It's difficult to solve global hunger. It's difficult to ensure that every person in the world has education. And all of such wicked problems are oftentimes addressed by think tanks in different ways. So in front of you, for example, you see the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and many governments, think tanks, and foundations use these wicked problems and progress made against these wicked problems as ways to evaluate and assess their own impact. For example, India's Niti Aayog publishes regular SDG tracking reports where they track the progress of different Indian states and districts in different sustainable development goals as defined by the United Nations. Wicked problems are even more difficult to solve just because they involve a broad range of disciplinary expertise. And we have discussed these in our previous education and outreach sessions organized by Jnanaprabodhini Foundation's analytics team. Please check out our Data for Social Good and Introduction to Computational Social Science for more details about these. The bottom line, though, is that solving wicked problems requires disciplinary knowledge across multiple fields. You cannot be siloed to solve wicked problems. Solving wicked problems also requires zooming out beyond events. And what do we mean by events? We mean by things that you will typically see on Instagram, Facebook, WhatsApp, the print and the news media. These are things that leverage the attention economy. These are clickbaity articles. These are things that humans typically like to consume. They include entertainment, such as film, TV, music, and video games. They include sports. They include immediate political events, such as who won an election, or who joined an alliance, or who might become the new chief minister of certain states in different countries. It includes fashion, includes the latest happenings of business, finance, and technology, such as what is the stock market doing today. And it includes happenings about important people and places. Unlike such events, though, wicked problems do not focus on attention-grabbing issues. They focus on, for a lack of a better word, boring topics. They focus on the large problems that have continued to confront us for centuries or much longer. They focus on the large, long-lasting, forceful changes that gradually reshape our world. And unlike the news, they are big global problems because they matter every day. They do not matter less or more on every day. They are not trending one day or the other. They're always trending. But because they are always trending, paradoxically, we don't pay attention to them. And maybe the situation may seem very stark and bleak. However, there is a solution. Wicked problems can be solved, or we can get closer to the solutions of wicked problems only using high quality data. And data, especially in the context of the wicked problems that think tanks deal with, spans many social scientific domains. And getting this data is critical for think tanks to make progress against wicked problems. And therefore, the role of a traditional think tank has been to facilitate access to such data. Oftentimes, such data comes from governments, from experts, from other auditors, such as the tax revenue or the census office, and think tanks interact as representatives of civil societies or as intermediaries with other researchers and citizens to get access to this vital data. And because the problems that think tanks deal with are wicked problems and controversial, the access to reliable and trustworthy data that everyone agrees with is vital to make progress. And therefore, the modern context, the modern data revolution can help make some progress in tackling these wicked problems. It provides many new opportunities to get data. It has helped in the birth of computational social science, a modern field that tackles traditional social scientific domains using modern computational methods and large repositories of digital data. We have discussed in previous sessions how computational social science methods can help improve traditional data gathering initiatives that think tanks engage in. For example, employment that is traditionally measured using large-scale national sample surveys can be detected and has been successfully detected using social media and mobile signal and mobility data. Earthquakes that are traditionally detected by meteorological agencies can be detected with high precision and accuracy using real-time social media data, as was demonstrated in the context of Japan. And disease tracking, which is traditionally done using in-person house-to-hold, door-to-door surveys, can be greatly transformed using digital means. We have seen all these contexts before of how data can help make progress against some of the wicked problems that think tanks typically deal with. And it is because not only does it provide a data and new methods to solve these problems, but it also involves a different approach of thinking, an interdisciplinary convergence of different ways and different fields that have different perspectives of how science and research should be done. And therefore, in the context of a modern think tank, they of course need to tap onto their traditional competencies in the social scientific domains, such as dealing with large, messy, complex systems that are characterized by wicked problems, tapping into interdisciplinary mindsets and having domain-specific skills. But more than these traditional social scientific competencies that think tanks typically possess, modern think tanks also need core computational competencies. They need abilities to do programming. They need rigorous inferential methods that ensure that the data that they put out there is actually a fact and does not remain an opinion. And therefore, there is need for specialization of experts, of technical experts in these domains. And there are some instructive examples of how think tanks have tried to do these. We do not have time to go into the details of all of these in this example or in this session, but I would highlight two examples of how think tanks have successfully incorporated computational social science into their traditional decision-making frameworks. At the Pew Research Center, they have been since 2015 completely overhauling their system to develop new methods and to provide new insights using computational social science. At the developmental data, they are emphasizing of how the open source movement is not just restricted to languages like Python or Linux or to the coding community, but how the open source data movement should also spread out to the social scientific and think tank community, where data does not sit behind silos, where data does not need lots of money to be accessed, where data is not just the new oil that is in the hands of big, rich, powerful institutions, but that data can be democratized and put in the hands of many individual stakeholders. These are some of the ways of how think tanks can use data to transform themselves in the 21st century. Thank you for attending this session of an introduction to think tanks, and we'll be back next time with another education and outreach session organized by Jnana Prabodhini Foundation's analytics team. Thank you.